Hi, we're here today with Fiona Hayes, who's an art director, a designer, creative director and consultant with many years of international industry experience working across media, publishing and fashion. Hi Fiona.
Hi Jennifer, it's fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate that you have a real breadth of different types of things that you do within your work. But perhaps you could talk a little bit about what a typical type of working day might be, if there is one.
Well, you're completely right. There's so many different things depending on the project, depending on the job, depending on the organization for a creative director. I really don't think there's a typical day anywhere. But one thing that is consistent, I really do think is consistent, is that your day is going to involve communication. It's going to revolve around communication. So if you are working on an advertising campaign or on a magazine or on a photo shoot or whatever, you're going to be starting your day by checking in with your team, seeing what people are working on, seeing if there are problems that have come up, seeing how deadlines are coming together. One project I'm working on at the moment is a coffee table book. I'm working on a coffee table book for a very nice fashion design brand. And so I'm creative director of the project. Yeah. And what this means is, first of all, we start with me coming up with the size of the book. I designed the grid, I think about typography, I did some type tests, I came up with recommendations for the headlines, the body copy, all that kind of stuff. So working on the design. So this is the first thing that I do, and then this has to be communicated to my editor, obviously, and to our client. So, you know, you're designing stuff, you're thinking about what the client's going to want, and then you're talking to them about what you've done, getting the feedback from them. If they have changes, then you're talking through the changes, deciding how, if you need to implement those. So, and day after day, then there are images, there are lots of photographs, obviously. It's a very nice coffee table book. Sometimes you would have a picture editor working on something like this. We don't have a budget for a picture editor, so I'm not doing the picture research, but I'm doing all the editing myself. So I'm thinking about, how do you tell the story the client wants in this chapter with the images that are available here. And sometimes there's an image that is not good enough quality or something, so you've got to go back to the client and say, this isn't going to work, or do you have something else? Or you've got to go to the photographer and say, do you have a high res of this? Or you've got to go to the photographer and say, would you mind retouching the color on this because it's not really working? So every day there's conversations with my editor about where we are on the schedule, conversations with the copy editor about where the text is. I'm trying to tell the story this way with the images. You're trying to tell the story this way with the words. We need to make sure they're bonding, and dealing also with the production side of it. So again, in some situations you would be working with the production department in terms of color balancing, or print, how things are going to be printed, or how a website is going to be developed, all this kind of stuff. Or sometimes, as in this case, I'm doing the retouching myself. I'm working with the printers in terms of, what do you need for the files that are going to be coming in. We're looking at papers. I'm in charge of the flat planning, meaning how everything goes in the book, where the inserts are going to go, where the gatefold is going to go. So it's all, one thing you would never do is you would never go away with all of this by yourself, do it, come back and say, here you go. Creative direction has to be a dialogue, a continuous conversation. And that's the one thing that is the same every day. Tons of conversations, tons of emails, tons of WhatsApps, phone calls, 2-hour Zooms, and getting the work done in between it. However, you can't have conversations continuously on some projects, even if you are needing to have the continuous dialogue. There are some times when a client, is just too busy, so you can't phone them 10 times a day or whatever. So for instance, I have a client at the moment, we're working on updating a website, and the project starts with me and her having a call with her where she talked through generally what she wants. And she very quickly gave me sort of like a point, a point, a point. So then I have to go away, revisit the website, make in-depth notes about what she wants and also what I'm seeing, what I think needs to be changed, what I think needs to be done.
Yeah.
And then I'm scheduling call with the developers. So I'm dealing a bit with the client, a bit with the developers, a bit with the project manager on the web development side.
Yeah.
And because, as I say, we can't have conversations all the time, everyone's busy, I put together annotated notes for everybody's reference. So a really important thing when you're working on some creative direction project is to be able to go, this is what we're looking at, this is what we need to do, this is how I think we should be doing it. You don't want to write essays for people, but being able, again, to communicate the problem, possible solutions, recommendations, so that you can give it to the other people who are working on the project. You can make sure your client has the trail of information.
Yeah.
So again, it's all about communication, however you make the communication work, but that has to happen. However you organize your day, you're always communicating in one way or another.
Yeah, and often translating or interpreting needs for somebody else within that process to be able to help fulfill them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of like go, the client thinks they want this, but perhaps they actually mean this. The developers are going to try this, but perhaps they actually could also try something else. So as you say, translating, thinking holistically about a project and making sure that everybody in the team is able to do their job.
What inspires you about photography and exhibitions?
I really love exhibitions, and I find exhibitions are a continuous source of inspiration. So I go to fashion exhibitions, I go to art exhibitions, I go to photography exhibitions. I write and podcast at the moment about photography exhibitions. I think exhibitions of all kinds work because we spend so much of our time on our phones. We're looking at this little square screen here. Or we're looking at things on paper, perhaps, or we're looking at things on slightly bigger screens. But when you're interacting with a screen, your brain is working in a particular way, your eyes are working in a particular way, your mind is working in a particular way. Mm-hmm. When you go to an exhibition, you're seeing things differently. You're seeing things in space, whether it's on a wall, whether it's, on the floor, whether it's all around you, whatever it is. But your brain is forced to interact differently. And I find that really it resets your brain, it resets the way you think about things. I think also scale is really important because, again, we spend so much of our time looking at things that are this size. Yeah. And scale makes such a difference. So if you see something like that, you're going to think one thing, but if you see a print that's that size, or if you walk into a room and you're surrounded by an immersive experience, it makes you think differently. And I find this incredibly important for getting me out of a rut in terms of creativity. Also, a really good exhibition tends to be, very well curated. So you're going to learn things. It may make you think about ideas or projects or people or concepts in a different way. So in every way, exhibitions are really my major source of inspiration. But then also I love films and I love books because, we're creators. What do we not love? But exhibitions to me are really important.
So what do you think the biggest challenges are now for somebody working in a creative director role?
I think it is understanding the moving parts of a team. Now, I know I talk a lot about teams, but that's because if you work by yourself, you're an artist. Being an artist is not the same thing as being a creative director. You may be working in a team of 2 people. You may be working in a team of 200 people. But I think that understanding the moving parts of a team is really vitally important, and it's extremely complicated. It is very challenging. You need to be able to understand your own place in the team. I hear a lot of students talk about, I see myself as a leader. I see myself as a leader as part of the group. I want to be a leader. But we can't all be leaders. People have to be followers as well. So to be able to understand the different roles within a team, the different energies within a team, the different skills and expertise that people need to bring to the table. These things are really, really important, and these things are challenging. Partly they're challenging because a lot of the time everyone is very focused on the end result. And when you're very focused on the end result, maybe you're under pressure of time, maybe you're under pressure of budget, maybe you're under other kinds of pressures. So it's quite easy to not pay attention or not notice when there are dynamic problems. So for instance, you might be working on a project where you do have, say, a picture editor and a videographer and a casting director, and you're working with all these people, but the casting director may be someone you haven't worked with before, and they were recommended, but then sort of halfway through you realize that they don't understand the brief, and the people that they're casting aren't working out, or whatever it is. Or it may be that you realize the picture editor actually is far, far more qualified than they come across, and they're being underused, and actually you can get them to make more of a contribution. Yeah. So it's that thing about understanding the moving parts, as I say. Everything, financials, budgets are important. You can come up with the best idea in the world, but if the client doesn't have the budget for it, it's not going to happen. Deadlines, you may have a brilliant idea, but if it's not going to happen until 2 weeks and your deadline is next week, there is no point. So it's really that. It's understanding how teams work and how you work within the team. Yeah. That's the biggest challenge, and that's the same whether you're kind of like doing it for the first time or you've been doing it for 25 years.
What qualities do you look for in a potential graduate level employee?
Probably some of the same qualities you look for any potential employee, no matter what level they're at. To me, the key thing is a deep, genuine, long-lasting interest in the team, in the organization, the project, the job, whatever you're applying for. Because the world is full of talented designers, attractive people who can present themselves well in interviews, people who are well connected, people who can work fast, people who can use all kinds of different skills. What sets you aside, what sets you apart is to actually understand the company, put it like that, or the people who work for the company, or to actually genuinely care. Caring about the place you want to work is really important for other reasons. One of those other reasons being that if you do get the job there, then caring about the place will help you when you're working late. It'll help you when you're tired out. It'll help you when it turns out the money's not great, or when it turns out there's somebody in another department who you don't get on with. So you have to care in order to help you get through. But for me, I always think of an example of a very wonderful, talented young person who asked me at one point if I could help them applying for a particular job on a particular magazine. And I said, well, what appeals to you about this particular magazine? And they said, I love their stance on sustainability and diversity. And I went, well, that's great. And I said, so what was the best article you read in the most recent issue? And they said, I haven't seen the most recent issue. And I said, well, okay, any issue in the last 6 months? And then it turns out they'd never looked at any issue of the last 6 months. And the thing is, this person is a wonderful person, very talented in many ways, but they didn't actually look at what they were going to look at. So there's no way that you can actually go for a job like that. You have to care, and you can't just go, I'll do a quick Google search and apply for the job. You actually do have to do the research and care about the place, the people. Read up on the history of the managers. Read up on where people had been before. Read up on what the company was doing 5 years ago. Read up on what the company is planning for the next 2 years. Do your research. And in case, you never know, you might just find out that actually you don't like it very much after all, and you don't want that job. Yeah. Also, really quite important.
Yeah. Interview them as well as let them interview you.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that is the key thing. Everything else is negotiable, but you have to care, be interested and care.
So if you could share one piece of advice for our students, what would it be?
Can I share two, please?
Go on.
The first piece of advice I would share for students is don't get hung up on titles. Creative direction is a very trendy title. I am a creative director. I'm also an art director. I'm also a designer. But creative director is one of those titles that it depends on where you are, what the organization is, and things like how you're being paid. So for instance, some organizations tag the job titles to pay grades. So different pay grades are going to attract different titles. It's not really to do with what the job involves, it's to do with seniority, how long you've been there and how much you're being paid. And also if you think of things like Kate Moss is the creative director of Coca-Cola. Kendall Jenner is a creative director for Forward Fashion.
Yeah.
You have to think, well, does that mean that they come up with concepts for campaigns and hire the talent and set up the photo shoots? They probably don't, really. So don't get hung up on a title for a title. Don't measure yourself by what people call you. Measure yourself by what you do. What you do will, in the end, be more rewarding than simply a label. Labels aren't going to do it in the end. And the other piece of advice I have for you is to do with skills. So skills change. You have to learn as much as you can, become as good as you can, but never imagine that now I can do X, Y, Z, so I'm set for life, because it doesn't work like that. Platforms change, computer programs change, industries change. The important thing to do is just make sure that you are always learning, keeping up all your skills, but keep in mind that in the end, what matters is not the skills, it's your ideas, it's your ability to generate ideas, develop ideas, and communicate ideas. That is the most important thing of all.
What are your thoughts on AI, Fiona, and how that might impact upon fashion and the creative industries over the next few years?
This is a $64 million question. It is something that we are addressing and we have been looking at for the last couple of years, and we will definitely continue to be grappling with this question going forward. When computers weren't used, we didn't use computers for design, digital photography didn't exist, and I remember how massively that changed the design industry and the fashion industry when those things came in. So the point that we're at the moment feels similar in terms of revolutionizing an industry. You have to learn different skills. People are doing things in different ways, and it's changing very, very fast. But at the same time, you can't ignore it. You can't imagine it's going to go away. I think the most important thing that people need to do, especially students, is to keep in mind the idea has to come from in here. It cannot come from here. Yeah. In order to be original, you need to work on, as I keep saying, you need to work on your own ideas, generating your own ideas, your own internal library of images, of thoughts, of ideas, and so on. And then you can use AI to express it, for sure. But AI is a tool. It's not the source. This is the source.
Why does the industry need creative directors?
Historically, creative director was a job title that really was only used in the advertising industry. And it is something that has become far more common, particularly in fashion and in design generally over the last, call it 10 years. I think the reason why it makes sense now is because the parts of a project used to be more siloed, but nowadays they are less siloed. So because social media has made such a huge difference, so if you have a campaign, if you have a new fashion collection and you're doing a campaign, you can't simply take the photographs, put them in a magazine, end of. You also have to be able to think of how they will work on film, how they will work on Instagram, how it will work on TikTok, how it will be seen by influencers, how it will be related to the catwalk show. And so the different parts of a project, just call it a project or a job, whatever, need to be thought of in a more holistic way. And I think that's what creative direction at its best is. It's like, how do I take this coffee cup and turn it into a film? How do I make it into a sustainability campaign? How do I make it into a recipe book? How do I translate this with different people drinking from the coffee cup? You can't just kind of go, once upon a time, it would be just like, here's the coffee cup, there's your picture of the coffee cup, that's the end of it. So that's why we need creative direction now, to think more creatively, more holistically, and in terms of different applications. It's actually that straightforward.
A lot of our students are very interested in content creation. What do you see as being the role for the creative director within that part of the industry?
Content creation is it's in many ways it's the bedrock of how brands communicate directly with their audiences these days. So whether it's, a fashion show and the content around that, the people arriving, the show itself, the reactions to the show, the decor of the show, the design, all this kind of stuff. The creative direction aspect of it is taking all the different elements that are involved in a show, for example, and thinking about how you present those to the audience in a way that the audience will understand, will appreciate, and will feel a connection with the brand. Let's put it like this. So back in the day, it would have been, you take the glossy photographs of the celebrities, you put them on the website, or that's it. People have to take it or leave it. You get the reviews of the shows written in Vogue and Washington Post and New York Times or whatever, and you have to read what the journalist says, and that's the end of it. Now, because the audience has changed, the technology has changed and the audience has changed, and so it's not a top-down, it's not a broadcast situation anymore, it is a two-way system. So you have to, as a content creator, you have to think, what does the audience want? What does the audience expect? How's the audience going to react to this? You can't just write a review of something and say, here you go. You have to go, what did you think of it? This is what I felt about it. This is the other people felt about it. And so it's a conversation. It used to be a broadcast, now it's a conversation. And so that is, again, this is why creative direction is really vital in here, because you still have to keep in mind, what does the brand actually want to say? What is important here? How do we manage to stay on brand? You have to have an element of brand guardianship at the same time as making the conversation happen and enlarging the conversation and moving things forward.